Good evening. It's 6 o'clock on Thursday, July 21st, 2016. Welcome and thank you for joining us tonight for the English edition of Aura News, where we bring you today's top stories translated into English every weeknight. After breaking yesterday's agreement for the judicial reform, new negotiations to reach an agreement for the adoption of judicial reform have been being held all day. The U.S. Ambassador Donald Lu and the EU Ambassador Romana Vlahutin held negotiations for the second time with the Democratic Party chairman in the Assembly Speaker's office. The Assembly Speaker was present during the first part of negotiations, but he left his office after about 3 hours. Earlier, the Democratic Party chairman left the negotiations and gathered the Democratic Parliamentary Group at the DP headquarters. As he left the Assembly building the second time, the DP chairman declared that negotiations will continue. It is learned that the DP chairman is accompanied by the Democrat MP Ord Bulikbashi. An Aura News journalist reported that the EU and U.S. ambassadors have made a new proposal regarding the Supreme Judiciary Council and the Supreme Prosecutions Council. But no further details have been made public. The fact that a new proposal has been made to the parties was also confirmed by Knut Fleckenstein, a member of the European Parliament, who tweeted, "Now the last proposal is on the table. My advice, end discussions, vote." The chairman of the Ad Hoc Commission, a negotiator from the Socialist Party, and the chairman of the Socialist Parliamentary Group joined the negotiations. It is learned that the SP members were informed about the new proposal presented by the ambassadors. It is not known whether the Socialists continued to be part of the meeting after the DP chairman's return to the Assembly building. If the parties reach an agreement, the judicial reform will be adopted in Parliament today. After a delayed start of Thursday's plenary session, Assembly Speaker Ilir Meta said that consensus for the reform is needed. The Assembly Speaker declared that the Socialist Movement for Integration will vote in favor of the judicial reform, but added that if the reform is passed without consensus, he will resign from his duty as Assembly Speaker. Mr. Meta stated, "I want to give assurance that just like I committed to guarantee legitimacy of this process, I will have the same commitment for its adoption. The SMI's vote will be in favor of the reform, just like I promised on January 5th. I invite the DP chairman and negotiators to continue with negotiations. Immediately after negotiations, the Ad Hoc Commission should gather. We cannot risk Albania's stability and its European integration for only a couple of remaining items. I have told the U.S. ambassador not to listen to rumors that Ilir Meta is playing games and that the 20 SMI votes will be in favor of reform. But consensus is needed. I truly believe in the DP chairman's responsibility. The USA wants a stronger, more democratic Albania. The US wants an Albania that is more committed to the fight against crime. If the Democratic Party will not vote in the reform after all the negotiations because they are afraid of the reform, I and the Socialist Movement for Integration MPs will vote in favor of the reform, and then I will leave the Assembly Speaker's duty. Why? Because I cannot stay in a parliament where MPs vote on the reform under pressure. They should be convinced. The MPs should vote on the reform for their country and the internationals." The Assembly Speaker declared that the consensus was not broken yet and insisted on continuing negotiations with the goal to consensually adopt the judicial reform. The Assembly Speaker said he will continue negotiations with the DP chairman, the Prime Minister, the ambassadors, and specified that the DP chairman should clarify his position with the USA. The Assembly Speaker excused himself from leading the plenary session, giving the responsibility to the Vice Assembly Speaker, while he went to his office where he was joined with the US and EU ambassadors and the Democratic Party chairman. Albania's EU delegation has called again for Albania's leaders to adopt the judicial reform in today's plenary session. Through a statement, the EU says that this is an important day for Albanians and that the party should respect their commitment to the reform's vote. Today is a very important day for all Albanian citizens, and we expect Parliament to adopt the historic judicial reform. The EU and US have worked in close partnership from the beginning and are in full agreement on all issues under discussion. We expect all parties to respect the public commitment expressed yesterday and to vote in favor of the reform. Several MPs from the majority and opposition have expressed their support in favor of the reform. The Democrat MP Mylinda Bregu declared that the judicial reform must be adopted today. This agreement and the reform must be adopted today. Yesterday, the Democratic Party made a decision to vote on the reform. This is the end of our mission. The judicial reform must be adopted, said MP Bregu. Also, Democratic MP Albana Vokshi declared her vote in favor of the reform. Democrat MP Edward Salami reiterated his stance in favor of the reform and declared that it will be voted on and there is no way back. These situations are unexpected, but I can assure you that no one can stop the judicial reform. It is an important step that has the support of the USA and EU. The judicial reform will be made with consensus according to Nuland's draft. Whoever is trying to hamper the reform will fail because today is a historic day. The faster the reform is adopted, the better. The Democratic Party has unanimously decided to vote in favor of the reform, MP Salami said. The Socialist MP Anastas Angeli declared, "We are waiting for the negotiations result." Meanwhile, the Socialist MP Valentina Lexkai expressed optimism for the reform adoption. She said, "The judicial reform will be adopted today," adding that the majority is stronger than ever. The Minister of Defense also declared that the reform will be adopted today. "I believe that the reform will be adopted. The people want the reform. It is important that we reach an agreement. The Socialist Party will show it has been serious in this process and based on international's recommendations. The process is difficult but not impossible. There are no impossible things but incapable people," the Minister of Defense said. The Minister of Foreign Affairs also expressed conviction that the reform will be adopted and blamed the DP chairman for creating a stalemate. Also, the Socialist MP Ben Blushi confirmed his vote in favor of the judicial reform, saying, "What has happened in the last 2 days is shameful, but the most important thing is that the reform passes in Parliament. I am here to vote on the judicial reform without conditions. The Albanian people are waiting for the adoption of the reform," MP Blushi said. The former Prime Minister said that the debates are 100% solvable and that there is no reason not to vote on the judicial reform. "We are ready to vote on the reform. The opposition does not have new conditions. I wish and hope the judicial reform will be adopted. DP MPs do not want to block the judicial reform. Debates are 100% solvable," said the former Prime Minister Sali Berisha. Before the plenary session, opposition leader Lulzum Basha rejected statements suggesting that the Democratic Party had made new demands after the majority and opposition parties had reached a last-minute agreement on the long-awaited judicial reform just a day ago. He called on all parties to support the constitutional amendments package and for a sweeping judicial reform in Parliament. Basha made a press statement saying, "Regardless of political convictions, yesterday we joined in agreement on the judicial reform. Statements that I have made a new proposal are not true. The agreement does not serve the political interest, but Albania's interest. We have reached an agreement on a good project, and we urge all parties to vote for the reform in Parliament today." The DP chairman added that there was an agreement between the parties, namely that the same formula would be applied for the 4 new justice institutions. "We agreed on the same formula for the 4 institutions. Jafai admitted yesterday that the Socialist Party's official draft does not include Nuland and Hahn's recommendations. There is an agreement and Rama should follow it," concluded the DP chairman. The Conference of Chairmen held a meeting today before the plenary session where loud voices were used to debate between the Assembly Speaker, Ilir Meta, and the Chairman of the Ad Hoc Commission on Judicial Reform, Mr. Fatmir Jafai. The Ad Hoc Commission's failure to gather yesterday evening after the Assembly Speaker's call was the cause of the dispute. The Ad Hoc Commission's chairman clarified that it was a matter of procedure and that he could not gather the commission only to discuss the Euro Commissioner Hahn's proposal, as according to Mr. Jafai, the Ad Hoc Commission discusses articles, not proposals. The Ad Hoc Commission chairman asked that Mr. Hahn's proposal be turned into an article, and then the Ad Hoc Commission can gather. The Assembly Speaker declared that the opportunity to reach compromise is possible, but the chairman of Democratic Parliamentary Group expressed his doubts of whether or not the reform will be voted on in today's plenary session. The chairman of the Ad Hoc Commission said, "Political will is in favor of the draft we have agreed upon. Also, the Democratic Party has agreed. If the Conference of Chairmen also agrees, let's make an extra procedure and send it to be voted on in Parliament." The head of the DP Parliamentary Group said, "The normal thing is to gather the Ad Hoc Commission for the agreed-upon draft. I do not think that July 21st will be the historic day and there is no other day tomorrow." The Assembly Speaker said, "If there is political will, and consensus, the issue can be solved today. That's all for our English edition this evening. Please join us again Monday through Saturday at 6 p.m. for your local news in English. My name is Mari, and on behalf of Aura News, thank you and good night.